On behalf of the Professional Baseball Strength and Conditioning Coaches Society, I'd like to welcome you to the PBSCCS Podcast. I'm your host, Chris Messina.
So the other side of this now, this is where we start getting into the fun stuff. So I see you Zercher squatting on Instagram. I see you throwing weighted balls. You talk about trying to throw 100. Let's talk about skill acquisition, training, yourself, players, differences, similarities, your time at Driveline, your time in college. Like, I want to just open up the floor about training, throwing, and how the two really connect. So where do we start with that? I'll let you decide. If you want to talk about your own stuff, if you want to talk about other players, if you want to talk about Driveline, you open the floor and we'll run from there.
Yeah, so I graduated college in 2019, and at that point, I had plans to try and go play some indie ball. Um, I had the job offer as the grad assistant at Coastal Carolina, and I kind of thought that was too good of a opportunity to pass up, especially for the career I was wanting to pursue. So I told myself, hey, like we'll move to Conway, I'll work there, and I'm going to continue training, and if I get good enough, I'll go sign. Ended up moving out to Driveline about 2 months into that, and I was like, oh wow, this is perfect. I'm at one of the best pitching, facilities in the world. So I knew some of the trainers going in there. I'd actually trained there when I was an athlete in college. I kept in touch with some of the trainers. So we had Rob Hill, who's now with the LA Dodgers as the director of pitching, and then Sammy Lizarraga, who's a former Vanderbilt assistant pitching coach. But they were two of my friends there when I got there, and I would just bug the absolute crap out of them about like, hey man, how do I throw 95? And they would like make me figure out that myself. And like, I would get so frustrated at the time, but like now I can look back and see like, instead of just telling me the answer, like they made me figure it out myself. Um, so like years and years go by, and I still, I don't know if it's just me being a psychopath, but in the back of my head, I'm like, hey man, maybe I could still sign. Like I could still throw 95. That was always my dream, pitch professionally. And then I kind of got to the point where I kind of saw the writing on the wall. I was like, hey, if I want to sign as a 27-year-old, I'm going to have to throw in really hard with no professional innings under my belt. Um, so it eventually just turned into a better opportunity for me to learn. Like I'm a very hands-on learner. I don't like to just sit there and, read about things for hours. I like to say like I sprint when I read. So like I'll read, 5 chapters of a book and then I'll put it down. I won't open it for another month. But like what I do love to do is bug the crap out of my really smart friends like Rob and Sammy and be like, hey man, here's this video. What can I do to get better? And then like I will just go do that myself. So it helps me learn a ton about pitching, just doing it myself. So I kind of set up my training the same way I train my own players. And I'll typically phase myself about 1 month in advance. So like we ended the season this year. I took 2 weeks off and drove out to Arizona. And then right when I got here, I started my on-ramp throwing phase. I wrote out my own lifting phase, just like I was going to do for my players. I did that block, and then at the end of that block, I would kind of sit down and reassess it, like what went really well, what could I have done better, and then I'll give that same exact block edited to the players. So I was kind of like one step ahead of them, and like I love to train, I love to throw. And I love to lift weights. So it works out really well. The players love it. They seem to be a little more bought in, seeing me do some crazy stuff out there. Um, but I love the training side of it. And if for whatever reason I pull a 100 out of me at some point, that'd be awesome. But I just love the learning experience that I'm getting from actually going out and doing it myself. I think it's just a like unmatched sense of like how does this program feel while I'm doing it, because I think a lot of strength coaches will write a program and then the guy's like, hey man, my back hurts, and it's like, you're soft. And it's like, well no, like you're doing it, like you're lifting, but you're not on your feet in cleats all day, shagging BP for an hour and then throwing 85 pitches at 100 miles an hour. Like you don't know how that feels until you go do it. So I think that experience of like doing my first velo day and remembering how tight my arm was the next day, but it's like, it's fine. It loosens up. This is what it's like, and I'm going to adapt to that. And then by, week 3 or 4, I felt great, and I'm seeing that velo bump, and it's just a constant reminder for me of like what these athletes are actually going through on a day-to-day basis, instead of just having this thought in my head of what I felt like, 6, 7 years ago when I was playing in college.
Yeah, when I was in grad school, I would do the strength training program for my baseball team like weeks in advance and really just use myself as my own guinea pig. But that was only the lifting side, right? And that was off-season lifting. And I've always like thought about doing a throwing program or like a bat speed program in the off season and just seeing how it feels. And to me, it just makes too much sense. And it's not that we're gonna just magically become pro players. You might. I have no chance, you know what I mean? But like if I can do this program and not get hurt and add velocity, or I can increase my exit velocity, like it's probably going to work for somebody who's actually skilled at the game. And I mean, I played really like low level college baseball. I understand the game. Like I watch the game. I know what's going on. I talk with our hitting coaches, our pitching coaches, but I understand and I empathize with how difficult 162 games in 180 days is and how much time on their feet they have. And I think that's really helped me with my conversations with players is I try not to pull that, oh, you're soft card, like if a guy's back hurts, because if a guy wants to cut a lift that day, like I don't think he's being soft. I think he's like really beat up. And the thing is, there's a lot of people that are like, oh, I would play that sport, for free. Like, oh, they make a ton of money. I would play for free. And I'm like, I'm telling you, you would not. You would not. And even if you did, you would break because you work a 9 to 5 desk job and you need 2 days off every week because you're too tired from sitting at your desk. Imagine you're standing that whole day in the sun, you're walking around, you're running, you're hitting, you're throwing, and you don't get those days off. Like if you can only go 5 days of work and you need a day off, 2 days off over the weekend. And again, I'm not saying this is right or wrong, right? Like this is just the reality of the game. We had one stretch where we played like 30 games in 31 days. And the only day off we had, we traveled. And then we had one day off and then we played like 10 more. We had like 40 out of 42, something absolutely outrageous. I don't remember the exact number, but it's like that is so demanding even on a support staff member, and we're not even playing in the game. Like when I was early on in the minor leagues, even like I would never sit in the dugout. I would always stand just to see how tired my legs would be. And then the next day, like see what my training looked like. And like just try to find a way to just like feel not to the level that they're feeling, because we're never going to feel that unless we actually play the game, but like just something to add some accumulated fatigue and then try to convince myself mentally and physically to train and to train at a high enough level that adaptations are actually happening. I'm not just checking a training box. And it's really, really hard. And so I give a ton of kudos to you for, one, pursuing it, and two, like staying committed to it. And now I am very curious because all the stuff I've seen you do, how much of that, like you said, you're editing the program to your players, like how much of that is making its way into the program in terms of like the Zercher squatting and the javelin throwing and the weighted balls and like the moving your spine with weight. Like and to preset this, I love all of it. I actually really enjoy like just watching your videos and stuff from afar because I'm like, this is like legit training. This is taking the training wheels off and like really pushing the limit of performance training. So I want to know like how much of that is making it into the program, how much of that is for your own, like just to see how far you can go before, like, because the thing is like if you get hurt, it sucks, but it's not the end of the world. If they get hurt doing something, like it's a little different. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And just adding that, like, even though I am throwing, like the demands of their throwing, and obviously with my guys being in rehab, like I'm for the most part fully healthy. Like I got my aches and my pains, and I've dealt with stuff, but like they're in rehab for a reason. So, I can't have all of them doing some of the stuff I'm doing, but I would say for a large part, like the training I have those guys doing is very, very similar to the training I'm doing myself. And that's more, I would say, myself doing the athletes training than like the athletes just doing the old meathead strength coaches program. But one of my athletes, he worked up to a 365 Zercher squat for three. He's a little farther along in his throwing program, and he's unrestricted in the weight room. I got him Zercher and heavy. Some guys don't like it, so I don't force it on everyone. So I'm just gonna, load them similarly with another implement that they enjoy, and they can actually like try really hard at. Um, like the Jefferson curl, that was like 5 years in the making. I started doing them about 5 years ago. And then I remember me and Rob at Driveline, we were sitting there and we were going to have a race to who could Jefferson curl their body weight faster. And that was just probably not something I would do to my athletes. Like, hey, man, let's see how fast you get to a body weight Zercher squat. But that's like the fun I have with it, where, like you said, if I end up getting hurt, then, I'm hurt for a few months, but it doesn't really matter. If one of the athletes gets hurt doing something like that, it's a much different story. So just kind of like keeping that in mind while I'm giving it to them, and making sure that like, hey, that's why I do it a month in advance. So it's like, hey, this really beat me up. This is not going to be good. So I'm going to can that and replace it with this. And, but this actually felt really good and I didn't think it would. So I'm going to dose a little more of that in there.
Yeah, like I said, when I was in grad school, I was doing our program, and there was a 2 or 3 week block that I had in there that was specifically meant to like really suck. And I went through it, I did it, and I warned them all ahead of time, like, listen, for the next 2 to 3 weeks, like, you're going to be miserable. If you have a significant other, let them know it's the training, it's not them, it's not you. If
Yeah.
your parents are wondering why you're feeling weird, it's the train. Like, you are going to be exposed to some really painful, difficult training. We have to get through this to get to the next block. And we did, and everybody went through it. And I'm sure for you it's probably similar in the sense of like, yes, it beat me up, but like this is too much, or like, okay, it's going to beat me up, but also at the same time, like, we probably need this level of training in this certain period of time. And that can help you with, the athletes really buying into what you're doing. Like, if they know you're fully invested in the process as much as they are, like, they'll probably follow you anywhere you lead them. Like, you lead them into a fire, they'll be like, this guy, like, we trust him. He's already been in that fire once. Like, he came out, look at, he's fine. Like, we'll go in there with him.
Yeah, and that's been the biggest thing too, is just understanding that like some of the soreness and the discomfort is normal. And like I feel like if I, wasn't doing some of that stuff and I had an athlete come up and be like, hey man, like this is really uncomfortable, I'd be like, oh, let's switch it. Instead of like, no, like this is supposed to feel this way. Like at this stage in your RTP, like it's fine to feel uncomfortable. It's fine to feel sore. Like some of that we want, especially early on in that process. So I think just giving me the context and that experience of like, no, this is supposed to be this way, or it's not supposed to be this way.
Yeah, the mental side, I mean, I know we hit on it with the rehab when we were talking earlier, but there is like a very real mental barrier to pain and to pushing through, and especially when you're coming back from injury. It's something that I've seen, really guys struggle with, in the sense of like, let's say they have an ACL, there's nothing on the imaging, they're fully healthy, they should be, full go, but they're apprehensive to push. Or like a guy is very far out of Tommy John, his imaging's clean, and he picks up the ball, and like he always gets to a certain point in his throwing, and it's like, it just doesn't feel right. It just doesn't feel right. And there's something to be said of like being in pain, but not having that pain be dangerous, or being discomfort and not being dangerous. And I think you're hitting the nail on the head there of, like you said, my arm is really tight after a velo day, but I'm okay. It's going to be okay. Where I think some guys feel that and they panic, and it just creates this, really bad cycle that is hard to break. And I think that's why that mental health professional comes in there. And for you, like, being able to have done the training and kind of give them a heads up ahead of time that this might suck, but it's going to be okay. And, either one, they're going to listen and they're going to be okay. Or the other side of it is like, hey, you said this was going to suck, but actually it wasn't that bad. Like maybe we can take it up a notch. And then like,
Yeah.
that's a further point in their rehab that you can kind of help them with. So it's really cool that you're doing all of that, man. And I really hope you pull 100 sometime. And I would love to see it. Is there any one thing that you think is directly relating to your velo the most, whether it's in the weight room or with the weighted balls or something mechanically you're doing on the mound? Or is it kind of just like the holistic aspect of all of it coming together, kind of like a fine symphony, so to speak?
Yeah, I think it's been everything coming through, and I've battled on and off arm pain since college, like even back to high school. I can remember, and I recently found out maybe about a year ago is like a very mild case of TOS. So that's been something I've been battling that whole time, and it's just kind of been, doing more research, figuring that out, both bugging the medical department, just doing research on how I could help fix that without surgery, because it only hurts if I throw and if I throw hard. So I was like, all right, I'm not a player. I can play catch with my son when I have a son in the future. Like, I'm not going to get a surgery just to have a surgery so I can throw hard for fun. So I wanted to see what I could do to get around that. So, just throughout the years, just trying to figure out different ways I could lift my upper body in the weight room without any pain, different, arm slots or arm angles, different changing my arm action. Like I've really remapped my arm action. It used to be really stabby and kind of like wrap around me. And I've just tried to do a lot more athletic throws. Like I used to play shortstop in high school. I went to college the two-way. So just getting back to like my roots is like being a little more athletic, taking some of the structure out of my like weight room routine. And now that I'm not like training to play professional baseball anymore, I'm just training to like have fun and be a good athlete. I don't have that sense of, oh, I need to do my 15 minutes of foam rolling and my 15 minutes of breathing exercises before I touch this weight. And then boom, I touch this weight and I'm fine and I don't get hurt. And then I'm like, oh, like maybe all that stuff was kind of a waste of time. So it's just kind of like reevaluating everything without that lens of like, oh, I need to do all these specific things because I want to go play professional baseball. And it was just kind of like a big weight off my shoulders once I kind of made the decision like, hey, I'm not doing that. I was like, I'm just going to do this for the heck of it because it's fun and I want to do it. And I think that's when like I took, my mind just opened up and it was easy. Like, okay, now I'm moving better than I've ever moved on the mound. Like I'm lifting more weight than I've ever lifted in the weight room because I'm not just stuck to these very, very specific principles.
Yeah, my brother plays college ball now, and I had my dad send me a video of him hitting. Actually, yesterday we were just FaceTiming about it, and I was like, he just looks so uncomfortable and unathletic in the box. Like, and he was a quarterback in high school. He's a catcher. Like, he's a very athletic kid. You know what I mean? He played basketball growing up. Like, he'd always play in the yard with us, and I called him and I was like, "You just look so robotic. Like, just go be an athlete. You know how to hit, you know
Yeah.
how to be an athlete. Like, go up there and just be athletic in the box and just, try to hit something hard. Like, you look like you're forcing it right now." And, part of it is the mental side of like, he's with a new team, he's trying to perform, he's trying to, show out a little bit, and he's just, he's nervous. It's performance anxiety, totally normal. But it just seems like I said earlier, there are certain aspects of the game where guys are just becoming so robotic, and it's like you said, I have to do this to be ready to throw. I have to do that to be ready to throw. If I don't do X, I can't do Y, and then I can't be Z. And it's like, I don't know. Sometimes you just got to go be an athlete and just have a little fun with it. And I used to be the same way. I used to be very regimented with my training. And now I'm like, as long as I can deadlift 500 pounds, if like one of my side missions in life is to deadlift 500 pounds in every major league stadium. And like, as long as I can pull 500, like all of my other training is whatever I want to explore. So if I want to explore movement mechanics, if I want to explore with water bags or 3D straps or weighted balls or, Zercher squats, or what, I can do whatever I want in my training and test it out. And it's like, I feel the same way that you're talking about. It's like a weight off of my shoulders of like training went from something I had to do to like something I just get to do and I get to have fun with. And like, yesterday I was out shooting hoops, and like I'm terrible at basketball, but it became a conditioning session for me because I was just constantly chasing the ball around. Like there's just different ways to like maintain your athleticism. And I think as you get older, like, that's the first thing you lose is just that quickness. And then when guys like, man, I used to be able to do this, I used to be able to do that. And it's like, well, you probably can't do that anymore because you don't do that anymore. Like you don't
Yep.
play pickup basketball with your friends. You don't throw the football around in the yard. You don't play kickball in the summer. Like, you know what I mean? It's just like, I think that's a major part that's missing in training is just having fun, being athletic, and like, letting yourself show out a little bit. And I don't know. It's just like, I don't know if a lot of training is really good right now. There's a lot of really good things, but there's also a lot of like robotic things, and it goes way back to the beginning of this conversation of like what is superstition versus what is like actual preparation and routine. And like some of the stuff guys do to get ready is just, to me, straight superstition. Like you can go out and pick the ball up and throw, like you'll be okay even if you just do that once a month where you just throw your rhythm off, throw your routine off. Like, because you know how it is in the minor leagues, you may have a 10:30 kids game, and it's like, are you going to do your 4-hour prep routine from 6 a.m. to 10 a.m. to get ready to maybe throw an inning in the game? Or are you just going to show up, play catch after a quick stretch and go? Like
Yeah.
sometimes you have to be able to do that. So I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, but that's just kind of where my head is at with things right now.
Oh yeah, 100%. I mean, we tell the guys all the time, like the training should be fun. Like it is a fun experience to come into the weight room and like do some of the things, like instead of just jumping on a box, like take a tennis ball and go do a 360 dunk on the basketball hoop outside, like put something really high in the air and have a competition with your friends to jump up and try and touch it. And I feel like that's something, at least personally, when I was training to play professionally in college, like that's not something I would have done because that was outside of the program that I had written. And it wasn't in there that said 360 windmill dunk on basketball hoop. It said box jump, 4x2. So I had to do that box jump 4x2. And if I didn't do that, and then, okay, I didn't throw hard the next start, it was like, okay, it was because I didn't do those box jumps. And it's like, no, I'm just not a good athlete. Like there's other stuff wrong here.
Yeah, honestly, if you would have got rid of the box jumps and tried to windmill dunk, you probably would have thrown harder.
Yeah, exactly.
What do you believe makes a strength and conditioning coach successful? Maybe like in general, and then specifically like in a rehab setting, working with, injured athletes that are trying to come back and play.
Yeah, so I think just ditching the coach's own bias and just making sure that like what you're doing is going to help that athlete get back on the field, but also be very successful. So I think like, especially in the rehab setting, I think a lot of strength coaches are content with getting that player back to being healthy, and he gets his MMI and he's cleared. Okay, I did a good job. But that player is throwing 5 miles an hour less than he's ever thrown in his career, and he's getting bombs hit off him left and right. And it's like, well, he's healthy now, but he's also worse. So like a big thing we preach with our rehab department is like return to peak performance. So like, we don't just want to return them to performance. We want them to return to the best they've ever been, if not better. And I think like a strength coach who can set their own bias and their own like different KPIs aside just to make sure that that athlete is going to be the most well prepared they can be to play their sport. I think that's a successful coach. And like obviously the KPIs matter. Like I want my athletes to, have a higher jump height on the force plates, have a higher peak power on the force plates. But I would rather my athletes get better on the field and those numbers just increase very marginally than I'm setting records and I'm, adding 100 pounds on a guy's back squat, but he goes out there and he's throwing slower. So I think a successful coach is just someone who takes that all into mind and into account when kind of evaluating a player plan.
I love that, man. I really do. I think there's so many times that in a rehab process, you look at somebody's baseline numbers, and then you're like, well, he's back to his old Nordboard score, so he's good to go. And it's like, well, that's also the score he had when he got hurt. So like, maybe it needs to actually be higher than that. Like, why can't we work on, upper body strength while he's dealing with a lower body injury? So, you know what I mean? Like there's so
Yeah.
many opportunities in rehab to focus on areas of improvement that I would agree with you. I think you have to come out of rehab better than you have before. And I think there's so much opportunity to do that. And I would agree with you completely. I've heard, it's just like, yeah, we got him back on the field, so it's good. And it's like, well, is it good really? Like, is he actually hurting the team by being on the field playing at this, level versus taking that one extra week to really tune him up so that when he does come back, he's ready to rock? And, it's probably a tale as old as time in rehab of like, you say 4 to 6 weeks and front office wants him back in 4 weeks, but you think 6 weeks, and then it takes 5 weeks and they're like, why didn't it? You know what I mean? Like, it's that
Yep.
back and forth of like, we want him on the field, speed the process up, but also like, hey, we could probably get this guy to a new level if we just give him an extra week. And it's like, oh, we don't have a week. And it's like, okay, like you're kind of playing with fire here. So that's a cool, cool little thing you guys have, return to peak performance versus just return to play. I think that's probably a model that should be kind of the norm, especially in professional sports with, the assets and the resources and just, how high the stakes are. But, and the other point that you're making about, force plates versus on field, I think baseball is so data driven that it's like, oh yeah, force plates, but like he has to have gotten better on the field because his force plates got better. And it's like, no, just watch the game. Like, did he get better objectively? Is he moving better on the mound? Is he throwing harder? Is he striking people out? Is he, inducing weak contact? Like, I really do, going back to our, talk about screening earlier, like I think the game is the ultimate screen,
Yeah.
and everything else is secondary to that. And I don't know if that's the consensus in the game right now, if I'm being completely honest with you. And maybe it is that way over there, maybe it's not, but that's just, in my mind, that's always made the most sense, is like, is he playing well or not? Is he healthy or not? Like, how do
Yeah.
we keep him at that level, or how do we bring him back to that level or better if he's hurt?
Yeah. Yeah, and like trust me, I've worked at Driveline. I loved Driveline when I was an athlete. I love the force plates. I love all the data. But I've also seen the other side of that where there's guys who get way too invested in like, oh, I can pull down this velo, and then they get on the mound and they throw 8 straight fastballs off the backstop. And it's like you can't hold a runner, you don't know how to change up your looks, you're tipping all your pitches. And I just think there's way more to that than just like the X's and O's of like, okay, he hit this benchmark on velo, he's good to go, he's back.
Yeah, I'm right there with you, man, and it's refreshing to hear that from you. Do you have any advice for others, either young coaches that may be looking to get into the field, or coaches specifically looking to try to get to rehab, or just the older coaches that are listening that just want to stay on top of things?
I would say just be yourself and find a good mentor. I was lucky. I met a guy by the name of John Crimmins when I was at Kaiser University. He was actually a nutrition professor, and he was just absolutely jacked. And I didn't even have that class, but I peeked my head in the window and I saw him, and I was like, I got to talk to that guy. I got to see what he's up to. And I just started visiting his office, and I didn't even take any of his classes until like my second year at the school, but we ended up talking a lot. And I mean, he was just incremental in helping me get to like always question everything, and push me to where I'm at now. And I think just the part about being yourself, like I think for a long time I just tried so hard to please others with what I was saying or what I was posting on social media. Like I was just trying to look so good and impress other coaches instead of like literally just speaking what's on my mind. So like now when I make an Instagram post, like I'll be on a walk with my wife and I'll like think of something and I'll stop for 5 minutes and like type in my notes, and like that's how I type out all my posts. And she laughs at me all the time that I just kind of like shroom brain them up. But I'll just be sitting there, I'll think of something, I'll type it out real quick and I'll post it. When in like years past, I would spend an hour trying to type something out and think, oh, what is, going to impress this guy that I look up to, instead of just posting whatever was on my mind. Like obviously not just posting nonsense, but just being myself and speaking how I want.
Hey man, if you've Zercher squat 405 for reps, you can say whatever you want.
Yeah.
I have a 500-pound Zercher in my back pocket that I can play when people want to say stupid things, and that doesn't discredit me from saying stupid things. But
There you go.
yeah, I understand completely, man. It's very much how I view social media and how I just think it's not it's not super authentic. And I think the people that are authentic on there, I tend to gravitate towards. That's why I like watching your videos. And honestly, I enjoy seeing like the process that you're going through and like that you're documenting it. So it's cool to see it. It really is. And the fact that you're able to do it within the professional baseball setting where there's probably a lot of stigmas and like old beliefs and like, oh, this is how we've always done it types. And you're just kind of like, nah, this is me. This is what I do. This
Yeah.
is what I believe. Like, this is who I am. Like, for me, I think that's really cool that you can just be yourself, be authentic. And it's exhausting to not be yourself. It really, really
Yeah.
is. It's really exhausting.
Yeah, it is.
So where are you going for continuing at? Are there any books you'd recommend, podcasts you listen to, seminars that you go to? Like, where are you going to stay on top of things?
Yeah, so especially in the rehab field, I haven't actually been to one of his seminars, but David Gray, he has a great interactive website that I've subscribed to the last 2 years now. So I think he's got, geez, it's like 250 hours worth of content on there at a certain time. I might be way off on that number, but I want to say that's what it is. And then he also uploads videos monthly. It's just great stuff in terms of the rehab field. So he's over in Ireland, and is also a rehab professional there. So I'll watch all of his videos. Podcast wise, I'll listen to David's podcast as well. I love listening to Jake Tura's podcast. This is the Jacked Athlete podcast. He's got some great guests on there. Um, Joel Smith's Just Fly. I love that podcast. He always has awesome guests on there, and just a great way to learn about different fields too, because he has a lot of track and field, football, basketball. So just getting out of like the baseball mindset of strength and conditioning there. Um, Book wise, I would say probably my favorite one is, I don't know if you've ever heard of it. It's called The Inner Game of Tennis. I might be butchering this gentleman's name, but it's Timothy Galway. I want to say it was written back in the 70s, and then got a recent edit, and was kind of republished. But it's a tennis instructor who kind of talks about a self one and a self two. And like one of the, I give this to all the rehab guys to read, even all the guys in AA this year. I tell them to read it. It's just a very unique perspective on, kind of viewing your own success. And he's like taking the emotions out of the performance you have on the field. So he talks about like, okay, you're on the mound and you just sail one way over the hitter's head. Like you're pissed, the hitter's happy because you threw a ball, and the umpire just saw you throw a ball. He just called a ball. He had no emotions tied to it. And it's like, be more like the umpire. Like, don't be mad, don't be happy, just see what happened. And then, okay, next pitch. So I would say Inner Game of Tennis, definitely on the book section there. It's by far my favorite.
Yeah, I'll have to check that one out. I actually haven't read that one, but it does sound very interesting. Okay, I want to finish with a lightning round and then I'll get you out of here. I know it's spring training, you probably need your sleep.
Good.
4 questions, as long or short answers, and then I promise I'll get you out of here. Cool with that?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
All right, first one. Who is your biggest influence in the field of strength and conditioning?
So I would say I mentioned him already, but John Crimmins, he was my mentor at Kaiser, and I still probably text him about once a week. I sent him that Zercher squat video the other day, and he was all fired up to see. I probably couldn't even back squat 225 when I was back there with him, so it's been great to see. But he definitely opened my eyes to the field of strength and conditioning. It was actually funny when I was in college. I was going to be a chiropractor, and he kept nagging me to get into the exercise science field. He's like, "Man, you make a great strength coach." And then he always wanted to get me into the exercise science field. And then when I graduated, they actually put the wrong major on my diploma, and it was supposed to be a double major in health science and psychology. And they ended up writing exercise science and psychology. So we had a big laugh about that. And it's funny the way everything panned out now that I'm in strength and conditioning and not a chiropractor. So,
One piece of equipment to train with, what would it be?
ooh, so I actually had an athlete ask me this the other day. So when I'm thinking of this, I'm in just an open field with nothing around. So I would pick a wall, so like a concrete wall or something. It sounds crazy, but I love plyometrics. I love sprinting. So for the lower body, you have your open field for that, and then you have the wall for overcoming isometrics. You could train running mechanics. You could do mobility on the wall. And then you could, like I said, overcoming isometrics. You could run up it, jump for height, run off it, do a 360, get some landing mechanics. So I would say a wall.
Biggest accomplishment professionally and or personally?
I'll go professionally. In the 2020-2021 offseason at Driveline, I got the opportunity to work with Shohei Ohtani. So I didn't get to work with him one-on-one there. My colleague with the Cubs now, actually Stephen Simmons, he was writing most of his programming. But just getting the opportunity to write the few bits of his programming that I did and just see him train on a day-to-day basis was an unreal experience. I mean, the work that he puts in is unmatched compared to some of the athletes I've seen. And I mean, just the dedication that he has to his craft. I mean, he was in there for 6 hours a day between his hitting, his strength and conditioning, getting his meals right. The pitching side of everything was awesome.
Last one, any career other than strength and conditioning, what would you choose?
I always wanted to get into the law enforcement field. Actually, that's what my father was. So I grew up idolizing him. He's probably my biggest inspiration. So, somewhere in the law enforcement field to some degree. I'm not exactly sure I'd want to be like a patrol cop or something like that. But I love that field. It's definitely interesting to me.
Connor, it's been good to get to know you, man, and I'm really excited for any future conversations that we have. If the listeners want to get in touch with you, where can we go? Is social media the best place, or is there a better spot?
Yeah. So my Instagram is just at Rooney Performance, Rooney. And then I am on Twitter. I don't use it as much, but it's just Connor Rooney 23.
Awesome. Connor, I appreciate it. Best of luck with everything. Hopefully, knock on wood, your season is not too busy this year for you. And we'll definitely be catching up again soon, man. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you for having me.
All right, everybody, that's going to conclude part 2 of our 2-part interview with Connor. I hope you enjoyed this one. If you haven't checked out part 1, make sure to do so. It was very well received, and I've gotten a lot of good feedback on it. 3 things that I took from Connor in this episode. Don't be afraid to test new exercises out on yourself before prescribing them to your athletes. Having a routine is important, but being able to adapt the plan and deviate when necessary is also valuable. And be yourself and find a good mentor.